I don't have access to an Adobe account anymore. Ah! I don't have an Adobe account anymore. I've had access to one for as long as I've been a designer, either in my studies or internship. But since all that's finished, I have to pay for it all on my own, and that stuff's expensive. And Adobe's a little evil, so... So hey, I'm Simo. I have to hold this mic in a very specific way to keep the cable from falling out, and I'll be ignoring every other great animation option and jump straight into animating in ways that are way more complicated than I have to. They are, however, also cheaper, as are all the other free animation softwares. I will be making 4 animations following the same motion, each with a different method. So it doesn't get boring for all of us, I'll have a different animal for each animation. The motion will go as follows. Take this dog for example. Animation starts, in this case with her sitting, she turns her head towards the camera, and the frame zooms into her face while changing into a wide lens. And that's it. Google Slides. It's such a useful tool for delivering information in a concise format. It can also, however, be an animation software if I click fast enough. For starters, I had to make a quick draft animation to base my final animation off of. So for the record, I did have to use an actual animation software, but this will be the only time I actually use it. Except the other 3 times. I didn't have to make the draft animation super accurate, since unfortunately Google Slides is the closest thing to an animation software I'll be using today, so I'll be able to make some tweaks as I go. Going into this, I was like 90% sure that there was a drawing tool in Google Slides. However, having opened a new presentation, I wasn't as confident anymore. It is possible. It's called a scribble tool, but I'm not sure if that name fits, since every time I try to scribble with it, it would delete my scribble. Why are you called the scribble tool if you're not gonna let me scribble with it? And while I'm talking about this tool, here's a few other things that I like to say about it. It automatically rounds corners, the tool gets deselected after each stroke, and if I want anything more detailed, I need to do it over multiple strokes, otherwise it makes everything very abstract. And there's no hotkey for it, so I have to click it with the mouse each time. I only have a touchpad. I'm starting to doubt that this is an animation software. Anyway, here's the bear. Before the actual animating, I started making the final look, since I wanted to use a variety of tools at Google Slides' disposal. And by variety, I mean 2. 2 tools. Shapes for the colors, and letters for the inner lines. The letters do only spell out brown bear. I feel like I could have done something a little more creative there. And after a good hour of fighting with layering of everything, it unfortunately looked whack. During a little break from whatever the hell this is, through some pretty weird coincidence, I stumble upon a card of a polar bear standing in a cool and more dynamic position just out and about. So I went back to the scribble tool and got something I was happy with. Onion skinning is a very important part in the process of animation. It is also not at all when making a presentation, which was a bit of an issue. While making the animation, I kept notes of my experience. The entry for the bear sitting down reads, "The process of animating the bear was very unpredictable and stressful, and I could only hope it would work out." Which does seem a little dramatic, but it really was at the time, especially with frames looking like this. Having finished with the animation, I defaulted back into drawing shapes, which surprisingly looked whacked yet again. So I tested out some other options. Shapes. Big shape. Smooth shapes. Letters in place of lines. Kind of a mixture of everything, but with a low quality image behind it. And finally, a text block. I do think if I trusted the process a little and finished some of the other styles, they would have looked good as well. But I didn't need to trust the process with this one. I liked it immediately. And look at it now. Look at it. Not only is it cool, but it also captures the whole idea of presentation, since the bear is animated with info about brown bears. That's like what Google Slides is all about. Presenting information, not animating. You can animate on it as well, but I don't. Actually, I think it's up to you if you enjoy a challenge, you know. Having gone through all the stages of the creative process, all that was left was the grind of making all the frames. Making frames was so repetitive that I couldn't avoid accidentally learning fun facts about bears. Did you know that brown bears have an exceptionally large brain for their bodies, which allows them for high cognitive abilities, such as tool use? They use the tools to scratch themselves. They really have it figured out. It was just text over and over and over and over again, and the worst part is that I think I could make this pretty easily with a clipping mask. Actually, wait, let me see. Here's the actual thing now. It took me way longer than I expected, and I'm a bit worried that might be the trend for all of the animations. But there's no turning back now. I'm serious, I promised to finish this video to like 10 people. So pros and cons of this animation software. Or I guess cons and pros, I'm going cons first. Cons. Can draw, but trash. It can't run an animation when there's too much stuff going on. And I thought easy, I'll just render out the frames. But it only renders a frame at a time. And it downloads it at the worst possible quality that is allowed. Legally. I assume this is a legal requirement. Pros. Technically, it's almost an animation software and you can draw on it. So, you know, and it has a variety of tools. So take that what you will. Lino printing is a type of printmaking that involves carving a design into a surface, in my case a linoleum block, which then can be printed from. Unlike my previous technique, this can't even be remotely called an animation software. An animation tool may be at best, but honestly what isn't with a bit of effort? And if I had to summarize this video, I guess this would be the summary of my video if I had to summarize. A cat is a perfect subject for this technique as it doesn't require a lot of detail to be recognized as a cat, which means less designing for me. I love designing. I'm not scared of designing. I'm scared of carving. That's what I'm scared of. Here's the only Lino print I've done. Ironically, also a cat. I guess I just have a natural connection between cats and Lino in my head. Due to my fear of carving, I was very careful with the amount of frames that I did, since that would mean less carving, and also I don't have infinite Lino block. Matter of fact, I only have one Lino block. The only tweak I did to shorten the animation was this wacky stretch frame to both make the jump more quick and save a few frames. It's rather difficult to draw a zoomed in face of a cat with very little detail without it looking like an alien, so basically the cat looks like an alien at the end. The actual process of Lino printing consists of drawing, carving, and printing. Okay, now on to stage 1. This animation can be split into two parts, the sitting and the standing. For the sitting portion, it took me 3 frames to finally accept that I shouldn't redraw each frame, and instead I could cut the cat's head off and animate it separately, then print up 2 parts together to keep the body from changing too much unnecessarily. I also saved so much space on my Lino block by doing this, the Lino block that I had one of, if you recall, from before. Onion skinning, believe it or not, was not an option here either. I didn't eyeball it this time. I had a whole scheme where I made lines to see where the previous frame's proportions were. Great idea in theory, but I ended up with cats looking very wonky because I boxed myself in by trying to fit in within the lines instead of freehanding them. There's definitely a motivational message hidden in here somewhere. Anyway, a lot of wonky frames fixing later, I was ready to print. No, I wasn't. I was ready to... This part mostly was just me pretending that I don't care if I mess up. The only thing that calmed my nerves throughout was saying I'll fix it in post. The fixing obviously being the ink of my pen over the prints. I do think there's some charm in the imperfections that Lino brings, which was also another one of my copes. After a few hours of carving and stabbing myself, mostly in my thumb, I had all the 22 pieces ready for printing. So now it was time for stage 3. I'm not saying it. If I say it, it cuts off. Yeah, we're just gonna hang out here. Did it work? Oh my god. Printing started off terrible. What seemed like a great idea of separating the head from the body became an awful game of fitting the head on the body and also hoping that both parts are printed well. In hindsight, if I had used paint for lino, which I had, instead of paint for cloth, this would have been way smoother. I just didn't notice. Since I used paint for cloth, getting a good print was completely up to chance, the probability being maybe at best 20%. So although I did at times get some good looking frames, at the same time I got a lot of terrible, awful, atrocious, unmobbable, or even low-key creepy frames. Here's me fixing it in the post, by the way. Once I had at least one good print for each frame, all that was left was capturing or taking pictures, so I'd have an actual animation instead of a bunch of prints that are very similar. Here's the setup. One table with a camera that cannot move to always have the same angle for each frame. One tape. I mean, once again, this was just a very repetitive process of choosing a print, aligning it with the tape, and taking a screenshot. Print, align, screenshot. Print, align, screenshot. A repetitive and extended process, so with a little bit of procrastination, I spent a day with a small part of my screen being covered by tape and me not being able to reach my phone. I ended up using the spare frames to add extra motion. So technically this is a both 12 and simultaneously 24. I can't say simultaneously. Both a 12 and simultaneously 20. Oh my god. And simultaneously 24 frame per second animation, since each frame has at least 2 versions of itself. If I heard this, I wouldn't understand. So if you don't, just it's a nice animation. Line of pros and cons / cons and pros. Cons are going first. Cons. Can't really call this an animation software, especially since the definition of software is the programs and other operating information used by a computer, which directly clashes with the whole not doing this on a computer thing. Since this is a real thing and not some fake stupid program with infinite paint, you tend to run out of things. I personally didn't run out of any, but I did need to make adjustments to not to. There was also a lot of debris. Like, a lot. And finally, and this might be a little bit of a me thing, but it hurts to do this. AKA I have blood more than I'd like to admit. AKA I could make a print out of blood. And now for pros. Cool. You also get to keep a little stamp if you want. The Finder app, as you may know, is pretty important. But what interests me the most about it is the fact that you don't have to align the files to a grid, which usually just helps me have my computer more disorganized than I ever thought was possible. But another unique feature about it is that enough files can make a shape. I wanted an animal with a harsh, distinct silhouette, since my canvas today is a folder and my paint has corners. So cow, I picked a cow. Basically a rectangle with legs. There are way more wide lens pictures of cows from the snout than I expected, so making an animation for this was pretty quick. Like, I mean this with no disrespect, but cows are so geometrical. This was basically just moving a bunch of rectangles around, which every animation is, but you know. I jumped into this without any plan. I just screenshotted a bunch of colors and just went at it, adjusting the files as I went along. This is how far I got to. Although going in without a plan in animation is already a bad idea, it's even worse when you don't know what the hell is going on. However, the silver lining is that I did learn some very important keys to follow while animating throughout. 1. Layers have names, and long names ruin the look. If I copy and paste a file, the name gets added with a copy and a number at the end of it. If I option and drag, it only adds a number at the end. Additional detail. If I duplicate the duplicated file, it adds another number to the end. If I duplicate the original, it makes the number at the end bigger. 2. I have to animate the body parts separately, so I can keep a good order of everything and keep the perspective correct. 3. Since Finder sees the Command or Control Z as for the week, I have to have each frame in a different folder, and have duplicates of each frame before making any drastic changes. I had to eyeball the first frame while doing the best impression of a printer to cover the names of the files. However, once I had the proportions, animating this should be easy. Foreshadowing. I do want to point out that frame 1 took a whole hour, which is a little bit worrying, but we move on. The rest was pretty straightforward, just a bunch of file placing. Since everything is set up, frames didn't take long at all. This is also foreshadowing. Since I didn't want the tail and shoulder to vibrate in animation, I needed to keep track of where to place them, and use my previously developed and honestly mastered tape method. When moving a group of files, it would mess up the order, which was very annoying, but the rest of the standing part was pretty much a breeze. I just had to remember to move the moving bits, but even if I did forget, it didn't even matter, cause I made backups. Although that also brought issues, cause renaming or even just exiting a folder reordered everything as well. You know how zooming is like one of the most basic things you can do in an animation software because it's just duplicating a frame and making it bigger? Well, it's not really possible in this animation software, also called a desktop. So basically, I'll have to redo the cow a bunch of times, bigger each time, and the small cow already took an hour. I don't know if you caught that from before, but the small one took an hour. This is where I get to talk about my favorite and reoccurring segment, and repeat after me, what about onion skinning? I hope you did repeat, because if you didn't, I'll just feel stupid. Anyways, obviously no onion skinning on this, but I will not give up until I'm able to almost sorta achieve it. For this, my plan was to use paper, use the screenshot of the previous frame, make it appropriate size for the next frame, and outline it. Then just follow the outlines. Simple plan means good plan, except the fact that I could not see the screen, which was not very useful. But other than that, I mean, it was pretty fun, like building a puzzle but you already know where the pieces have to be, or one of those coloring books, but with very limited space for coloring. Mine is the ability to leave the drawing unfinished, because for some reason leaving the folder, either closing it or letting the computer to sleep, it would reshuffle the layering of the files. One small problem with that. It took me at least 3 hours to complete each frame. You know how many hours that is? Because I didn't count. But it was at least 20 to 30 hours of this. And the worst part, I overdid the frames and had to delete one for smoothness reasons. I probably should have changed the size of the files as the cow got closer, but I made a conscious decision to keep my brush stroke consistent. Looking back, this probably would have saved me at least 10 hours, but that's neither here or there. I did become really good at pretending to be a printer though. To be honest, there is one frame missing to smooth the animation out, but I just couldn't take it anymore. Here's a stupid stinky animation. Here's a stupid animation that I hate. Here's a stupid animation that I... Find their pros and cons. Cons. Hell. Pros. I did this to myself. No matter how hard I try, I do still sometimes care about what people think. One of those times is this time, by this plot of wall that I've gotten permission to make a spray paint animation on. Don't actually show it, because I've already made it. No spoilers. Okay, I'm not doing this whole section here. I'm going inside. I don't know why I didn't introduce this technique the same way I introduce every other technique, but this is graffiti. You've probably seen it around. Pretty cool, and yeah. Editor Simonas here. Hello. I wanted to include a crow in this wacky ensemble I've got because like 8 months ago when I originally tried to make this video, I was gonna use a crow for everything. Except this technique, actually. Which is pretty interesting. Anyway, I basically had to use it. Why I chose a crow? Only this guy knows. Also, cow and crow is basically the same word, which is awesome, because my filing system is already not in a good shape, and this will make it even more confusing while editing this video. For this animation, I wanted the crow to fly in first and then have the zoom. I may have taken some creative liberties on the wide lens look, but isn't he just so handsome now? For the actual animation, I needed to make a stencil. I made one out of leftover bags and glued them together because it needed to be stiff. I'm not gonna lie, making a graffiti with a stencil is basically just lino, but reverse. One big difference though was the fact that this will be on a wall for every passerby to see, so I couldn't get away with frames like this. I polished each frame until the draft animation looked like this. At this point I could just fake it, but I won't. I won't. I tried drawing out the frames on the stencil by hand, but honestly, I was too worried about messing up the wall. So I used the good old technique of pressing the stencil hard enough to the screen until the silhouette is visible and outlining it. To cut the stencil, I got a precision knife. Obviously being a little wary with my reputation with slightly sharp objects. I cut myself maybe in the first 2 minutes. Another challenge with this animation was that I couldn't have any parts floating, so I had to connect them with lines which made the crow look very goofy. Look at him, he has glasses. Birds don't have glasses. But once again, I'll fix it in post. Some connections were really thin, but I managed to keep all the birds with their beaks on. Doubling the stencil was not a good idea because I think a single layer would have worked. 2 is harder to cut, which made my knife break not once, but 2 times. And worst of all, none of the glue stuck, so just each frame cut twice. Except frame 18 for some reason. Testing the graffiti was a whole emotional roller coaster. On my first tries, I just had some clear liquid come out. Which is why I shake the can, by the way. My second attempt was just a puddle of paint which nearly made me quit. But that was only because I was spraying it too close. So on my third try, I got it down, which was exciting to say the least. I don't think I would have ever been ready enough to actually spray it on the wall, but this was probably the most I could be prepared for it. So I made a little box so I don't spray the wall where I shouldn't, and at the same time not have my hands too full. Although I completely made it too big and my hands in fact were too full. The actual process of spray painting ended up being so smooth. Sure, I may have missed almost all the points I marked to spray the frames, and now they're uneven, but the final animation was finally prepared. This part was probably 20 minutes, and believe it or not 30 hours. Here's me fixing it in post, by the way. Okay, the animation was like 95% prepared. While compositing, my first instinct was to follow the positioning exactly as the draft animation, but I had made each frame too close to each other and there was just too much for the eye to comprehend. Sure, I could have used AI and expanded the pictures, but I also could have just faked the whole thing from the beginning like the draft animation. But why would you even suggest that? Also, once I extended some grass in a design I made and marked the usage of AI on the Instagram post, and that little tag on top haunts me to this day. Side tangent aside, after accidentally scrolling through all my pics which accidentally made an animation, I decided to have the crow in the middle at all times like all the other animations, which was kinda better cohesion wise. Okay, now cons and pros. It's almost more natural for me to say that now. Cons. This also kinda sometimes hurts. Honestly, I only cut myself once this time, but still. I feel like an animation software shouldn't be able to cut you. And also, uh, it's illegal sometimes. So, pros. With preparation, this can be pretty simple. And also, I mean, it's also cool, so. It didn't even get dark this time. Here are the final animations for one last time. So to conclude, I definitely need to invest in an animation software because this won't work long term. I'm finally finished with the video. It took me way longer than I expected. I watched New Girl throughout making this video. It has like 7 seasons, I think, and I watched a lot of it. Okay, I watched most of it. Fine, I watched all of it. Arrest me. It was a nice show. Of what the hell were those intro sequences in the middle seasons? Like those are terrible. Anyways, thanks. Thank you for watching. If you have up until now. If you liked the video, you can like it. I did disappear for a year there, but I am planning to come back with the train has left the station. No, I don't think that's the saying. It's going. The train is going. I will be posting more now. So you should do the red thing. So okay. I'm going now.